We buy something when it solves a problem. And watching someone juggle doesn't solve a problem. Getting them to laugh, getting them engaged in the characters, using them on stage, creating an experience that solves a problem for them. And that's what my partner and I became very good at. And that's why we moved into the corporate market really well. We understood problems that a meeting planner was going to have, that a VP was going to have, that a global sales team was going to have when they came into a room. What are we going to talk about? How are we going to keep people off their phones? How are we going to get them to remember these certain marketing points we need them to remember? It's like we did all that stuff for them in our show. We made it all memorable.
That's really interesting, Barry, that you talk about in the green room before we actually hit record, which sometimes I feel like we should record because there's some kind of some good moments. But you and I were talking about the power of presence, and and I'm listening to you talk about that is that it almost seems like no one cared about juggling, but what juggling did was allow them to actually be present. And you're talking about these VPs. Hey, what are we talking about? It's about, getting them off the phone. It seems to me that what you gave people was the thing that we all want, which is to be where your feet need to be.
I love that. Yeah, where your feet need to be, where your eyes, your mind. Yeah, that's really nice. That's yeah, and maybe that's I like to always carry it when I was doing a show like that. Like this is the only thing in the world happening right now. Like that's where I came from. It so it allowed them to be in that little container, and it has to be the difference because honestly, without understanding all these pieces and learning how to solve a problem and aiming for higher clients, I mean, honestly, between you and me and a listener, I could have been a birthday act my whole life and been bitter and made no money. But instead, got to travel around the world all over the place and be in rooms I would have imagined being, and make money. Make seriously good money for doing something that could have been a birthday party act real easily.
I think about the fact that you took like a birthday act and made it into something where you are interacting with some of the most famous people in the world in rooms where like people the amount of money in that room is in the bees, right? It Yeah, and I'm curious, what would you tell someone today who goes, you know what, I don't really have a lot to offer, right? Or I could just do this little thing. I mean, you're talking about something that juggling, which by your own words you said no one really cares about it, but you turned that into this amazing career where you are in a place where, you know what, you are making impact with people, and it all stemmed from something that no one cares about.
It's funny, and it goes back to the beginning, and this will hopefully answer your question about what would I tell someone is something that matters to you can turn into something that changes the world for a lot of people. I was, I, my parents, I think I don't not really too close. My mom passed away, and my dad. He's an engineer, so he doesn't really have the emotional capacity that I gained through a life of traveling and making connections with people. But I think I'm the receipt of a weird night for some teenagers, to be honest with you. There was no plan. There was no, big, hey, we're going to have a kid and everything. It just, just happened. And I had some terrible times in childhood, living in a car when my parents split up. No one knew anything that was going on. Me and my two brothers just traveled around, lived in different places, apartments. I think I went to a different school every year of my school from third grade till high school when I moved in with my dad. But during one of those summers, my grandma sent me to a camp and some guy taught me to juggle. And I swear to you, Ben, I went home from that camp as a 15-year-old kid saying life will never suck again. It's just like I knew life was from this point going to be different because of what that guy taught me out by the pool one day. And yeah, and I made it different. I think it was 15 to 22. So 7 years later, I won my first world championship. I most of my teen years, I would go to sleep with cuts in the web of my hand here between my thumb and forefinger because just from practicing so much. And I was young, so it healed quickly. But the next day, I was ready to go again. That's all I cared about. I knew the answer to a better life was in this thing this guy taught me one afternoon.
Yeah, you just said something that I think is I want to unpack a little bit more. You said you lived in a car for a year.
Well, yeah, it was off and on all the time. I mean, my mom, she was young, she was in trouble. My dad was disappeared from the scene. My two brothers and I. I remember so many weird scenes, weird nights where we were just like moving or sleeping in a car or trying to eat or, just terrible stuff I'd never wish on anyone. In fact, it was probably the reason why when I was married. My wife and I were married 15 years before I even thought I could handle having a kid. He's 24 and out living his life now as a successful guy. Uh, but yeah, a lot of the story from childhood was unpleasant. It was accidental. Yeah, and I'm so grateful to I always name him when I can, Michael Moskowitz. He's a big CFO for some big dot something company now, but I found him on the internet years and years later and wrote him a letter about how he changed my life. Really
Wow.
intense.
So you find out how to juggle at 15, and it sounds like you found an avenue and you said, "You know what? Life will never be the same." So, what do you feel like was driving you, though, at that time? I mean, was it like, "I will never be displaced, I'll never be poor." I mean, what was it that, I mean, because 'cause you're talking about, like, unusual focus. I mean, is it fair to say, was it obsession?
It was beyond obsession. It was really all I cared about was how do I do this? How do I break down? And it was pre YouTube, way pre YouTube. So I couldn't even watch people, but how do I break down? Or I'd see a picture in a book. Or I remember seeing a juggler on Merv Griffin when I was around that age. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to break down everything he did or everything that happened there. It was so I mean what it was this is the first thing that feels good. This is the first thing that feels safe. It's the first thing that feels in my control. I mean here, I nabbed some of these. These are three garden weasels. These are not things you should start with throwing around, but I haven't warmed up or anything, but yeah, this is but now anyone who's listening is going to go find a place to watch this on YouTube. I know that. But that's talk about control. Just like I guess it was probably a feeling of control. It was something I could control at 15 when everything was chaotic. I mean, I never knew what day to day was going to look like when I was a kid, where I was going to be going to school, where we were going to sleep. It was a nightmare, really. And I think when that happened, I'm so thankful my grandma just sent me to this camp one day where this guy taught us that. It's nuts.
And just for the listeners, like, who are listening to this, he was literally juggling. If you imagine these two, like, kind of long-handled, or like three long-handled pieces that have basically, like a thing that spins around that are stars that, like, you would use to hoe.
This was an early commercial, the Garden Weasel.
When I'm thinking about you at 15 doing that, what though about the juggling though that you were like, I'm getting so into I mean, did you know that you were going to launch into, like, an act? Or it was like, was this like a coping mechanism? You know how they have, like, fidget spinners? Was this like your coping mechanism?
It was definitely an early fidget spinner. It was something that I could do, that I knew I enjoyed, that didn't depend on anyone else, that my parents kind of hated. And to be honest, that was all right. I wasn't crazy about them. I think I was moving in with my dad probably around that time. Yeah, I think my dad had kind of found out that our life was scrambled all over, and he raised up and became a dad and moved us in with him. So I think, but I I never looked around and saw adults that I thought, ooh, that's a good thing. So the fact that they weren't crazy about it was kind of a cool thing when I think back on it. I go, oh, good. They were. I do it on the front lawn of his house, and um, maybe he was somewhat embarrassed by it. I don't know, but I didn't stop. It's all I really thought about was juggling. High school was interesting though. My dad was an electrical engineer, and when I first came to his house, when I first was going to move in with him, he had a ham radio set up, and he was on Morse code. And there was no way in the world to get through to this man. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to hear about much. He just and engineers are sometimes like this. They don't have a huge emotional capacity. So I became expert at Morse code. I mean, Ben, the speed at which I can receive conversations and have conversations in Morse code would freak you out. A completely outdated skill now. It's not required for the military. It's not required for ham radio. It's gone. But yeah, so I tried to get through to him that way, and I did get through to him that way. We got to play with ham radios together, which was great. I played the oboe, like the guy in high school teacher said, you have a large chin, you'll play oboe. And I was like, okay. So between Morse code and oboe and juggling, I think I was like begging to be beat up. But I had a good time with all of it. But they were all little obsession things. They were all some sort of form of little mental exercise, probably some level of OCD involved in all those. Yeah.
Were you aware, Barry, of kind of that you were being, or maybe at the time, I'm not gonna say being, and I don't even know necessarily, but like that in maybe in retrospect, you look back and you go, begging to be beat up, and usually typically I think those are things that those are usually instances where you are either being misunderstood, like you are different, right? So I'm gonna say the word an outlier. You were an outlier. Did you realize then that you were an outlier? I mean,
I must have. When I was doing juggling that much and no one else was doing something that much, anything that much, not juggling, but no one was putting that kind of time in on anything. And I thought, oh, is there something wrong with me or is there something right with me? I can definitely recall having feelings like that when I was 15, 16, 17 years old. And I mean, that obsession was before school, during school, if I'm being honest, and then after school. Yeah, just filling it in. Yeah. Maybe it was some level of it felt good to be doing something different. You know, it's funny, and I'll own this. I won't use the general you statement. I'm not gonna say when you see something because I have no idea what a listener's thinking. But uh when I saw the world, I didn't see a ton of happy people when I was a kid. And this stuff made me happy. Like it really made me happy. So I just remember thinking, wow, this is really cool. This is like a step up.
that is amazing. And I'm guessing that then you also not only saw, like you won't brought happiness for yourself, but I've been to a bunch of different shows, and when you think about that Juggler comes out, I was actually just in Philadelphia. Went to Cirque du Soleil show, which was amazing. They had this Juggler come out, and he finally got up to I think like 8 batons or whatever those they look like. They always look like bowling pins, yeah. And, he ended up not being able to do it, but you know what I loved about it? He just was like, you could just see he wasn't, like, down about it, but then he got, like, the crowd so fired up, and of all of the acts, his was the one that got everyone involved because it wasn't like the strongman act. It wasn't the high flying act. It wasn't where they're doing flips, but it was the one that I think brings you back down to like precision, and I feel like something that people could actually envision themselves being like. I think at one point or another, someone has tried juggling. Just
Yeah, people do. People usually give it a go for a quick second. I've developed a way where I can be juggling with anyone in less than a minute, and it's fantastic. I have these balls. They're called success balls. People can look those up, but they're just filled with packing foam peanuts, and they're light material with packing foam peanuts. And between me and another person who's never juggled, we could be juggling three so easily together. And I love giving people that little feeling instant of like, oh, this childhood is fun. The look on the laugh on their face when they're doing it is so hilarious. So, but juggling takes a long time to get into for sure. It's a lot of hours you can burn in there in that gym.
so Barry, you take this love of it sounds like from the standpoint it was a coping mechanism, but it was also where you saw for the first time the daylight in what seemed like a gloomy world. And you turn that into, Renaissance fairs, and all of a sudden you get discovered. And now all of a sudden you're traveling all over. You're 6 time, or excuse me, 4 time, world champion in juggling, 6 times on like the main stage TED Talk, or TED, which is not exactly an easy thing to be able to be do or to be asked to do. Did you ever feel though where your strength of a juggler took you to a place that was like you flew like Icarus too close to the sun?
I will answer that with the relationships that it brought into my life. That's really where it wasn't so much the performing like that. I felt like, oh, here's somebody who found what he was supposed to do on this planet was make great jokes while juggling three ping pong balls out of his mouth. Like that was really happy. But the relationships, wow, the circles it got me into, the conversations. I'm looking at a club right here that's signed by Robin Williams, and it was interesting. I toured with him for whenever he toured for 6 years, from like '86 till '92. Did every concert that he did, we opened for, and he was such a giving man. And one of the things about Robin was he was never to be left alone for the obvious reason what happened when he ended his own life. I mean, that was somewhat present way back when people worried about him. And there were certain times we got to do that and just learning like, here's a scared dude. Here's a guy who's a genius and a scared guy. And so what I would always try to do is look for, what parts of those can I relate to? What can I see in myself in all that? Because isn't that what we do? We don't. There's a great quote by Anais Nin. She says, "We don't see things as they are; we see them as we are." And years, decades before I ever heard that quote, I don't know how, but I would just look, oh, how does that relate to me? Or it's just always interested me. Why did I see some things in some people? But in Robin, I would see this in a bunch of people that I've opened for, or corporate events that I was at, or CFOs, CEOs that I met with to really hear what they needed to have happen at this event. Was we're all human beings doing the best we can with the tools we have, and my career as a Raspini brother, as a juggler, it got me into rooms that I would have never had those conversations. So that's what I would say took me closer to the sun than I was prepared to be was those conversations. I did not have that. I didn't. Uh, I didn't have the. I don't know if the bandwidth is the right word, but I certainly wasn't prepared. Like this. This is what's going to happen if you get really good at this art form.
Yeah, well, it is interesting to me because I think people were really surprised by Robin Williams, right? But then they start hearing more and like comes out and people like, okay, you know what? But I'm curious, what other sort of life lessons did you learn by being with people who outwardly be a bit like they they have made it. They are the pinnacle of like success. They are the like the North Star that like in that particular profession. So if you're in comedy, right, you're like Robin Williams. But what else did you notice when you look at the performers that that would surprise people to know?
I'll give you a high and a low. Which should go first? What do you think, the high or the low?
Let's go high and then
I was Westbury Music Fair in New York, beautiful theater. We were opening for Billy Crystal, and there was a break between our act and his, about 20 minutes, and a knock comes on the dressing room door, and I open the door, and it's Gregory Hines. And I basically had tears coming down my face right when I saw him. It's like, oh my God. He said, I left the audience and came back here just to tell you guys never to stop. I was like, holy shit. And this was Billy Crystal's the one who actually called the Tonight Show after our first appearance in 86, March 86. And he said, I want those guys to go on the road with me. What are they doing? And it was great. And we were on the road with him basically instantly after that. But yeah, I'll never forget that. Like I never forgot Gregory Hines. That's so a high of how people can be is to take a second to show up, to just say a single sentence that changes their lives. A low, I go to that, was in Detroit in a classy hotel. I don't remember the name of the hotel, but it was a beautiful hotel. I was touring with Roseanne Barr. And from across the lobby, she goes, well, for one thing, she kept shortening our show every night because we were killing too hard and the reviews were horrible in the paper. One reviewer said, my best advice is to get there as early as you can, get a good seat, get everything you can about the opening act, and then lower your brow as low as it'll go. And I think when that came out, we got down from 30 minutes to 25 minutes to 20 to 15, and we were doing like 10 minutes by the end of the tour. But in the hotel one morning, she goes, hey guys, like from across the hotel. And she pulls down her pants to show her butt. And she goes, I just got a new tattoo. And I thought, I never want to be a person who someone can tell a story like that about. Like just classless, bad every sense of the word. Like conniving, never even talked to us about our act, about not, working the audience, whatever she had a problem with so much. But just called her agent, and then her agent would tell our agent. It was just so crazy. So yeah, there's highs and lows and so many in between. I mean, yeah, look at names. Jay Leno was a great dude. He got stuck like on a private jet once coming into Atlantic City, and my partner and I were working at another casino in Atlantic City, and we were in the audience that night because we'd known the entertainment director for the Sands where he was at, but we were in the audience, and he comes about 10 minutes later, and the hotel we were working at was right next door. He goes, is there any chance? And I hate asking you guys if you could do something. Jay's plane got stuck. So, man, we just grabbed stuff out of our dressing room and ran up there and did Benny King. It was the only night Benny King opened for us because it was going to go Benny King into Jay Leno. But so Benny King did the longest version of Stand By Me ever in history. And lots of verses. Everybody got a solo that night. And then we were in the wings ready, and we did like 20 minutes, and Jay Leno came out, and he just never forgot that. He was like, Jay was always the greatest guy to us, our whole career, just anything you need. So that was really cool.
That is pretty wild. So what would you say though is the learning lesson when you look at that in terms of if someone is looking at today, right? Because there's never been more opportunity, Barry, to be able to do the thing that might be on the fringe, might be an outlier, or might be in terms of, well, this isn't that like special, but like we're in the world of like AI that can make a company and a business plan and a marketing plan and a social media plan in the course of, a week. I heard someone the other day say that in the world of AI, wasting 10 minutes is now the equivalent of if you had wasted 2 weeks.
Wow. Whoa. And I think it may be accurate depending on what you're
Yeah.
building.
So, but I find that your story is so applicable because you took something that outwardly would say, if you were a high school counselor, you would say, there's no way that you'd ever be able to make a career. There's no way that you could, in essence, I'm gonna use this word, become world famous. And so when you think about your own journey, what would you tell someone today with the tools and the opportunities they have now to find that joy and to turn that into something that, I mean, who knows? I mean,
Love that. And I don't think you read, or I never told you, but my high school counselor did tell me I'd be broken homeless by 22. You always have that meeting in 11th grade where they bring you in and say, "This is your last year of high school." And I said, "Mr. Pav, literally, all I can think about is juggling and my future." And he goes, "You'll be broken homeless by 22." And it was painful uh, to hear that. But, here's a dude who was kind of a beat down high school guidance counselor. He wasn't living his dream yet. So, but yeah, I guess what I would tell someone is, gosh, find a way to make someone's life better. Just say something. I am such a believer that there are single sentences. In fact, doing a whole bunch of writing right now about this idea of single sentences that I've heard in my life and that I've told other people that have had some impact on them. I and this maybe even works more powerfully in the world of AI and reels and shorts where things have to hit quickly. But there's a single sentence that you have said to somebody that they haven't forgotten, for better or for worse. And there's single sentences that someone has said to you that you haven't forgotten, for better or worse. So I would say really get those in line and know when to say it. I think of Gregory Hines just coming back there and saying, "You guys never quit, never stop doing what you're doing." Uh, that was a single sentence that was very important to me. So, and in the world of AI, gosh, isn't it easy to feel like there's nothing we can add? But the only thing it can never duplicate, and maybe it can come close. I don't play with it too much, but is you. Who you are, what you bring to this puzzle, the unique things, the risks you're willing to take, the things you're willing to say, the questions you're willing to ask, the the bold statements. It's so different. It's so different for every industry.
yeah. Well, I think the thing that it takes, and I'm listening to your story, uh, you're living in a car for a year and being a transient from like third grade until like you moved in with your dad. I
Yeah, there'd be
mean,
a couple nights here, a couple nights there, a week here in Las
yeah,
Vegas. Yeah, just
yeah, like AI could never try to go, what would that be like? And so I think there's a huge level about you being in the arena. Um,
in the arena. I love that. Yeah. There's this thing about AI, and the little amount I played with it, and your listeners have probably played with it, you know, uh, more than they've forgotten more than I've known. But my first impression of it when playing with it was it's written to blow smoke up your ass. It just really like it. It tried to make me feel so good without knowing me, and that what I was saying was good and smart. I was like, what? How is this a good thing? And then I realized algorithms in general are made to keep you on them. And I guess if you feel really good and not good about what you're doing for yourself, you don't believe in what you're doing, that external affirmation could feel really good. But boy, be careful. Don't inhale. Don't inhale the smoke.
you know, when I think about with what you're talking about, like being able to roll a ball from ear to ear, are you talking about like over the top or around the backside? Like, what are you talking about?
We
Like,
go right here from the ear across the forehead here. And then after three of those, go down. It goes in the neck crook and then back to here. But yeah, I have a video. I'll send you a link to a video of me doing that. But man, I can't do. I'm happy to be able to look left and right nowadays. I used to balance. heavy stuff on my head. I had a table setting that I balanced up there. It's in this video I'll send you. And I'd knock out the plates and the cups would fall together and then it would all land. An egg would be on top and it would drop in. So I used to lean my head back at 90 degrees, balance stuff on my face. I had a pool table with 11 balls that would bounce back and forth. And I showed a chiropractor. She goes, ideally, you would never have done what you did for a living even one time, but we'll unwind you from there.
Wow. Wow. So obviously, I the word I keep coming back to is you could say dedicated, determined, but I think the word I keep coming back to is you got lost in the art of becoming. And but I want to talk about this because I think there's a level of there's like a spectrum, and there's the idea of obsession, which I think is maybe the unhealthy, and the art of becoming, where it's like you live, eat, and breathe this because it's just for whatever reason we don't know why, right? It just is in you. Um, can we talk a little bit about because the word keeps coming to my the phrase is like getting shit done because I'm thinking talking about you're talking about the crooks of your hands being cut up because you had spent so much, right? So, I'm guessing can you talk a little bit about, though, like, you went from that to balancing a pool table. Like, so, ho talk about, like, getting shit done because that seems like you don't do that unless you have a focus and, like, an incessant drive and, like, you're not wasting time.
Yeah. And maybe this will answer your question a little bit more too that you asked about what can someone do today? Those like that pool table on my head, there was a juggler named Kara, Kara, German or Swiss or I forget which Swiss or German juggler, but he had a thing called a table and it looked like that, but there was just a still picture of it in some book about juggling. I was like, wow, I wonder if I could make something like that. And the obsession just kind of became how would I design it? What would I make? Who do I need to have help me make this thing? What could it work? How much will it weigh? And then the whole time in the background, how am I going to perform this? It's like I planted that seed that I want to perform this thing. And my brain was, how do I make this funny? So that was always happening while I was drilling screws and measuring angles and thinking about how fast should the ball roll from one level down to the next. And what's the drop off look like? Is it a hole that it kind of drops through, or is it just a plank that it falls off onto the next one? Yeah, and so by the time I had it built and working protocol, I knew this routine I was going to perform. I was going to just and at corporate events it was great because I would just find out 11 things that they wanted their customers to know, their users, their sales team, whatever, and each ball would be that. And just chuck them up, and my partner would be like calling out the things which he had on a cool list on our snare drum, so he didn't have to memorize them. But this is your dedication to lower prices, to customer service, or whatever. So, we could just tie stuff into corporate events so beautifully. It sold itself. And yeah, I guess it's just, yeah, that becoming is huge. And there is a level of mastery that you're really helping me realize right now because you and I talked about aviation. We both have a lot of hours in that left seat, and it's a lot of fun. But I had no reason in the world to get an instrument, and I certainly had no reason in the world to get a commercial pilot's license, except I was obsessed with becoming better at the skill, better at the craft, learning what it was. And I still have that. And somehow I've managed to hold a marriage together 40 years. Very patient woman.
I want to come back to the marriage piece because I think that there's some lessons of maybe in terms of the same thing you brought to juggling to there, but it it seems like to me though you also found a lot of freedom in your craft of juggling, performing, making people laugh. Is that something that kept you going, and is that something that as you have laid down the art of juggling, so to speak, has been hard to r backfill?
Mm, yeah. I think I've just backfilled it with, yeah, because I did retire. November will be 10 years since my last show with my partner, which is, time flies. I remember the show well. I guess I've backfilled it with other other activities I wasn't good at that I got good at. Like, this is boring. This is when the listenership may drop off, but I've fallen in love with gardening, believe it or not. It's funny. We have this beautiful gardener house. I just love making things line up. And cleaning edges and color combining on plants. I don't know. I love it. So that's super fun. I've been a fan of mountain biking most of my life. I still do that a lot. Distance swimming is one of my favorite things to do. A lot of time to think distance swimming. Just such a wonderful activity. And I look at my sports, and really the only things I like doing are things that use both sides of the body equally, and that's got to be a leftover from juggling. Like you'll never see me throwing a football. That would be heresy to my muscular system. Like anything one sided like that, I never was interested in. Um, but yeah, I like bilateral sports so much, and yeah, I guess, gosh, just how do we self improve? How do we learn more about what this whole journey is about? Parenting is something I definitely backfilled it with. I had zero modeling for how to be a parent, and boy, did I! I mean, I have one case study, but he's 24 and been off payroll for 2 years and did an amazing college career and making beautiful films in LA as a director of photography. And so I think I did a good job on that one.
Yeah, so Barry, let's talk a little bit about that because if you look at your past, um, you didn't have a whole lot of role models of what does it mean to step up and wear that identity of a parent, mom, dad, right, or even husband, wife, right? Like how to, or partner, right? What? Uh, can you talk through your experience of you decide to have a child? I mean, is there a point in there when you decide to have a child that you were filled with some trepidation of going, "Man, am I gonna fuck this up?"
Yeah, am I going to be my dad and my mom again? Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I mean, you have a handful of kids too. I mean, do you think of that? I mean, we have to. It's a whole different epaulet on our shoulder, isn't it? When we take that on.
I agree. I think that there are balance sheets that we carry around, and then there are balance sheets that carry forward. And I think that like kids are the assets and liabilities that we bring as I think as parents, and then we carry our own from like our parents. And I'm really curious, how did you balance your balance sheet of, like, I mean, there's a lot of reason why you could have said, you know what, A, I don't want to have kids, or B,
That was 15 years. Yeah.
yeah, or B, you know what, like you're gonna carry on either like as you said, the emotionless environment that your father brought, and and it sounds like maybe the disorganization that your mother brought. Like, talk to me about how you were able to transition that into a marriage of 40, or at least a partnership of 40 years. And I think I saw written down like married 38.5 of those years. By the way, I appreciated the point five. You're like, no, I'm not rounding down or up. It's just I'm giving a credit for every moment of that.
Yeah, no, it's pretty much to the month. Yeah, I did have some good models. Certainly not in my house, but when I met my now wife in January of '86, I was touring with Robin, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, from '86 on, and we were doing a show in Portland, Oregon, at a giant stadium there, and it was the first time I met her. And this, I met the parents, and she didn't come on the gig. She was at school at UCLA, so she didn't come to the gig. But I was touring out there. That her parents came. We Robin's dirty. They're very clean. They were very clean people. They were proper Midwest people. They moved to Oregon when all the kids left. But so I was like, oh, a little bit, because I'd only talked to them on the phone. I'd certainly never met them. And that was October of '86. So yeah, I had been together with Annie since January, and then we moved in together in May. It was very quick. I was still had a room at my dad's house where I lived when I wasn't on the road, but we got a place together, and so it was something else to meet them. But what I learned that first night, we went from Portland from the show. I drove back and I stayed at their house at night, and we sat around the table talking, Ben, for probably 2 hours. And man, what was going on inside of me was I'd be way more comfortable right now if everyone was yelling at each other. I'd be way more comfortable if we were just all in our own rooms alone. I'd be way more comfortable if anything except this was happening. And because I loved Annie so much, I was able to breathe into it. I just said, I'm going to be with this. And what I saw was just this modeling of like, oh, these are the kind of people that make her. So I did see, and her two brothers that I had talked to also, they seem like great people. I hadn't met them yet, but like these are the kind of parents, they've been married forever, that uh, raise their kids consciously, that send them for a good education, that are there for them, that are willing to meet, you know, a guy who is living with their daughter, and so I just said, I'm going to, and I learned so much from them. I mean, they were great role models in my life. Their whole for the rest of their lives. We traveled together. We did some wonderful trips, and that was neat. That first night, there's a funny story about him. We Robin always had meet and greets after the shows, so there was a meet and greet in Portland, and I brought my in-laws. I met them at the ticket office because this was not, we didn't have phones where tickets lived. So I got them tickets at the box office, got them in. That was my first meeting. And then we did our show and killed beyond words, of course. And then Robin did his show. And then I met him afterwards. I said, oh, there's a meet and greet backstage. I'll meet you right here afterwards. So I brought him back and I introduced him to Robin. I said, oh, this is my girlfriend's mother and father, Galen and Jane. And Galen shakes his hand and he says, would you like to sit down and talk? And Robin, knowing who he is, me knowing from our touring that he didn't like to be alone, he said, I would absolutely love that. They're sitting there. And finally, after about 20 minutes, Robin's manager goes, do you know who Robin's talking to? And I said, yeah, it's my girlfriend's dad. He goes, that's got to end. There's 100 people here who are waiting to meet him. So I just said, I just went over and I said, hey, Galen, let's go talk. But Robin was so happy, and my father-in-law was a marriage and family counselor. I mean, that's how he got to know people, was sitting and talking to people. Yeah, and so that was amazing. And well, he said, oh, we just talked about life and his business and his family, and he told me about his kids, and he turned it into a session. So it was amazing. And then to go back to their house and talk to them at night. So I think that was just good modeling that got me out of that whole car situation, random. And my two brothers and I joke that we were receipts of three receipts of young people who just didn't know any, didn't plan anything. It's really weird. So I certainly didn't want that. So
Did you find, because I think that it's important to use the past as the energy source for, like, the future, but did you find, though, because oftentimes your marriage is your R&D lab, where you start to uncover, there's maybe some things maybe I need to re-underwrite, remetabolize. And I'm curious because you've had the most consistent, if you want to call, lab partner in with Annie. Like, can you talk a little bit about the importance of, like, understanding that past, and maybe give some examples of where that reared its head, in your life, and maybe in, like, your closest relationships?
yeah, I'll tell you that when I first started performing at Renaissance festivals, I was so starving for female attention, and deeper looking into that as an adult means mother love. Like I didn't have any mother love, so I was such a such a willing partner at these Renaissance festivals for random strangers. I'll try to say this as nicely as possible. I, at the end of the day, Ben, I couldn't believe I was actually also getting paid. It was like I get money too. It was just ridiculous. So you know that retooling that, living a life with one person, that didn't happen instantly. That was hard. There was times when I was not happy with what I did, but shadow sides take over and what it is, and the sooner you can return to honesty and having the conversations, not in an effort to save what may or may not still exist, but to move forward honestly from that point. Uh, that's something that's harder to do than not do. And I think anyone listening, if you're sitting with some decision that gets in the way of you being your authentic person in life, and a hard conversation is the bridge between where you are now and that, walk across that bridge. You may lose everything you have, but you'll be an honest person. You'll be a person who stands in integrity and makes decisions from that place, as opposed to that sort of shadow place still driving the ship.
Wow, that's really powerful. That's really, really powerful statement. So, what I'm hearing you say, it's, you may be wealthy on a lot of different metrics, but if you're not an honest, you'd rather have honesty rather than than all the trappings.
All the trappings and having to go on living with some kind of a lie in you. So it's a horrendous weight to carry. And of course, 100% transparency is close to impossible. But with that inner circle you live with, that you're lucky enough to live with, be it work partners, a romantic partnership, a life partnership, boy, if that can be a clean container, you probably won't recognize who you are in life. And it's scary as hell to just say, I got a bag of shit here. How much are you feeling like unpacking with me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is the exact sentence I told my wife when it was time to clean up everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you mind kind of carrying out that sort of story in terms of like how did that go? Like how did that go in terms of when you said, "Hey, I got a bag of shit. How much do you want to unpack today?"
How do you want to unpack? I think at that point it was, some bad stuff had blown up, and some indiscrepancies had blown up, and it was like, don't know what's going to happen here, but I know on the other side of this conversation I got to be free. So you can't. I didn't feel. I didn't feel like I had the right just to open the bag and say, "Oh, this, unpack all this stuff." So respectfully, just saying, and she said, "All that you want," and that's what we do. That's what we do in deep relationships, is all that you want. So yeah, talking through things, owning things, clearing things up, not getting so much into the why, because the why can go back to living in a car with my mom, when I'm 9 years old and feeling unsafe. The why could be because my mom never was able to show love or care or compassion. And there was a stranger in Minneapolis, pick a town or whatever, that would, even if it was for a night. It's like, that's the why, and it's unimportant now. But the thing is, who do I want to be moving forward? How do I move forward with this? And the way to do that is to clean it, not hide it anymore. And I'm using my story, but hopefully anyone listening to this, um, you're translating this in real time into your situation.
Yeah. How did obviously I would never ask you to put words in Annie's mouth, but how 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 was she able to metabolize that with you?
Slowly, yeah. In a word, slowly. Yeah, certainly not. Oh, good. What do you want to watch? That was. But I think in a way, the truth is what every partner we have is waiting for. If we are waiting for us to be bold enough, brave enough, honest enough, sincere enough, vulnerable enough to share the truth, we have a partner everywhere that's waiting and willing to hear it. If they're not willing to hear it, you probably just saved you and that partner a whole lot of time. Because if we're ready to become something new, if we're ready to undo something, if we're ready to live from a new place, the best thing you can have, well, two best things you can have is a plan and then someone who believes in you. Yeah, and if you have those two things, lean in hard. Because if you fall, at least you get up and you're standing again, and you know that that's not a dependable wall to lean against, or maybe you went too far. But yeah, the shadows. Jung wrote a lot about shadows. There's all kinds of great writings on the shadow, but the shadow has its own mission. It has its own mind. It has its own goals in life, and if it's driving the ship, it's rarely the stuff that the golden side of us is proud of.
Man, well, I really appreciate you sharing that, Barry. I think that is incredibly powerful because I think we think about these things as balance sheets, and I think that we've often forget though that there's an underlying start. Then that's just like honesty. So I'm curious, Barry. So you have this moment. You're kind of in essence, it's sort of the tide's gone out, and you realize like your pants were down, right? And um, how what did that do for you on the other side? Like, at what point did you were you because it seems like to me that as you let that out, it was actually also a form of therapy, healing, and also like accountability, and not from her to you, but like you to you.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and me to a group of men that I was lucky enough to be in a men's circle with, where I just said, "I'm going clean," and they were going to ask me next Thursday night, "How did it go?" And well, what happened on the other end is really beyond belief. It was a reawakening, a realization, a true renaissance of the relationship, and understanding a a bilateral unification in understanding each other's needs and finding ways to get them met that never in a million years could I have imagined happening. So everything became possible. Everything, there were no blocks. And I realized also the only blocks were inside my head, the story I was telling myself, letting that shadow part drive the ship. And it has its own story. But oh my gosh, the other side of that, yeah. I mean, bliss. That was, gosh, that was probably 20 years ago when all that happened, and the life since then has skyrocketed every possibility. And now it's funny what it also does is it opens the door for both parties in a relationship to not go into that dark place about a belief or a shadow or a desire at all, but instead to just say, here's something I'm thinking, and go with that, like to take off from there, let that be the starting instead of something that's dark or hidden. My God, the amount of time you could burn uh, wondering how to say something, if I should say something, if I should just sneak something in, if I should lie. Like when that goes away, you realize truly how much time there is in a day. You're not wasting a second of it.
Wow. How much time do you think that you were living in the lie state, that shadow state?
Oh, shit. Uh, I'd say probably ages 19 to 45. Yeah, 19 to 45. Yeah, it's a lot of years. 26 years, yeah, loose math. And doing the best I could with it, uh, doing the best I was allowing myself to do with it, but not doing well. And a good part of that was raising. First 5 years of that was raising a kid. That was really one of the big things. When he was 5, I was like, okay, something's got to give. There's another time for you guys to find YouTube. But I was came back from a road trip, a 2-week road trip, and I said to my wife, I got to figure out some way uh, to make a living that doesn't require me to be on the road 150 days a year. And then I went mountain biking with my friend. And later that afternoon, I had this installed in my collarbone. this, this is a pin to hold 5 pieces of my collarbone back together. I flew off my bike for absolutely no reason on the simplest part of the ride. And I related it back to me right before that ride saying, I got to figure out some way to not go on the road, to not be away from this kid when he's growing up. In 8 months, I didn't juggle. So, but yeah, I always keep that thing handy. That's the ultimate reminder of a turning point in my life.
So let's talk a little bit about, right. So you because at the end of what I love about your story, right? So I think one of the reasons why I created Max Life podcast was to have these like real conversations, right? They see the outward success, like 4-time world champion, 6-time, TED Talk, main stage, all these names. But at the end of the day, the real wealth that you have developed in your life came from like you being in the shit, and dealing with the shit. And so I love that, like, that you share with your wife of just of creating that clean space, that clean glass between you. But I want to talk a little bit about how did that transform then as you with your son, right? I mean, one of the things you and I talked about beforehand was that you said, you know what, you made this comment. He goes, I moved to the mountains for my son. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it's not like, "Oh, my wife and I, we really love the mountains." You're like, "You know what? I'm moving to the mountains to raise
Right.
our son."
We I had never lived on a well and septic tank. But I looked it up after we I was pretty much city. You flush something, you never see it again. Here, a guy comes and you know sucks it out of the tank a month later or something. But yeah, but it was an interesting thing. It was part of drawing a line in the sand. It was part of creating a new container for this section of our lives. We were married 15 years when our son was born, um, and that long delay in having kids was something we both agreed on at first. I think probably 5 to 10 years earlier, she would have been a fan of it, but I was still locked up in a lot of weirdness uh, in my head, in my life, past, all the stuff about having kids. I was pretty happy just being the two of us. It was easy to go on trips, and everything was easy. But then when that happened, I was like, I was coming home from a show. He was about 3 months old, and we were living in North Berkeley, up in the Bay Area. And I remember I was flying home from a show in Austin, and somewhere on the way home, I thought, wow, what if we raise this kid in the mountains instead of visiting the mountains, and we can go back and visit the city and stuff. Just reverse that all. And we had a great neighborhood. Everyone was just having kids. There was a community, had a clubhouse we had at the end of the street. We had monthly dinners. Everything was great. It was a terrible time to go pitch this thing to a postpartum woman who was, just loving her community. But I just said, I have this real vision that this will be a good thing. And I kind of went strong on it, and we used to joke that it was my turn to call the move, because we tended to move like every 5 years or something. It seemed we moved, and one of us made the decision. But I said, I feel so strongly about this. So found this great place up in the mountains between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe. This really neat little town. Turns out later in life, we turns out a whole bunch of other people moved there at that time to raise their kids. We didn't know, but it was wonderful. We knew nobody. It was snowing in October, and we were sitting like on the front porch of the house, and my wife goes, "We'll look back on this as the worst decision we ever made." That was her pity moment. And then she had done one class with our son. It was called Music Together. It was like a mommy and me music class in Berkeley. Well, she enrolled in one. There was like 8 sessions, and she'd done like 4 of them before we moved, and she loved it. So she found out about that. She went and took the training and opened up a center in this little foothills town. And we had 85. She had 85 families sign up instantly. They were people who were waiting for someone to do something like this. So, needless to say, like by January, it was not the worst decision. We had all these amazing people in our lives, all these kids, and she was her email to this day is still Teacher Annie. But that's what every kid called her. So it was just, yeah, really excellent. But in a way, she's a creator too. She's just, you know, uh, I think we always saw that in each other, that we can just create our own realities. And yeah, it was amazing. So she was Teacher Annie up there for 17 years, and until we moved, and someone else took over Music Together of the Foothills. Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you find though? So you raised a son, right? And so when I think about, it sounds like you navigated your way to from being a boy to a man, kind of on your own, trial by fire, trial and error, and you found an incredible partner that was willing to walk beside you as you actually stepped into becoming an actual man, and walking in that honesty. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you have a couple initiatives and things that like you're doing, like the boys to men, or the men's initiation and venture stuff that but can you talk a little bit about how having kind of a front row seat of doing that with your son, and then how that's in your own adventure of becoming from a boy to a man, has kind of set this all in motion.
Yeah. Do you ever look at any of your children and think, oh my gosh, that's a mirror of a different time in my life? Like you're looking into a magic mirror?
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's the funny thing. My son was bald and looked exactly like me when he was born, and I was performing a lot. And I took him on a cruise ship. We did this funny thing one night. I recorded an overtrack of a ventriloquist, and I did a ventriloquist act with him on. My wife handed him to me. I brought him out on stage for like 2 minutes, and we did this funny ventriloquist act, and looking at each other. But his voice was on the tape, and I just asked questions. But yeah, I mean, that's what kids are. Motivate they motivated me. My son motivated me to look at a different life, to first to just get out of the city, get out of where we saw police activity every day, where we just heard things, where it was weird to go out sometimes, where there was traffic all the time. So I'd never thought of doing that in my life, but I looked at all the airports near where I could fly out of to my gigs, and drew a circle an hour drive, and this place was in there, and I was like, oh my gosh, Sacramento Airport. Yeah, so that's a first motivation. Or then when he turned 5 years old, well, first, even before that, like talking and walking, and I realized that they don't listen or understand everything, but man, do they take every single thing in that's happening physically. I almost think language gets in the way for the purity of their learning when they just imitate and follow and learn the glances and learn all the things that work like a dog kind of, like a dog can read read what you're going to do when you're going to walk. I end a Zoom call and my dog like hears the sound of a call wrapping up and knows it ends up. So it's funny. But so then around 5 though, when I went and I did this really amazing weekend through the Mankind Project, that was when I really got challenged to take ownership of my life. It was he was 5 and I thought, shit, man, this can't go on any longer. It's too intense. So yeah, doing that was a really wonderful help. I know some of your past guests have done that work too. I've certainly heard them talk about that. Um, yeah, and then going to staff these weekends after doing them, just going on a junior staff, mid-level staff, senior staffing, doing co-leading opportunities. Uh, I realized men live a story that's handed to them, most of them through culture and sometimes even through their family. You grow up, be a man, don't don't cry, big boys. All these stories that get in there, and they're usually issued. Those commands are usually issued by people who got them issued to them too. So it's just a long string of poor information that's getting passed on. So yeah, doing a little bit of deep in, but I knew some guys who had done this work, and they were more like the people I wanted to be as a father. As my son began to talk, go to school, find interests of his own, so that was huge. And then going to staff them, I just saw guys coming in. It was so funny. My wife will go to a workshop if she loves the picture on the homepage of the website. Men need to be like basically either bankrupt, just out of jail, just divorced. Some bad thing has to happen for a man to get to a point where he has to do some sort of self improvement in general. But I would see hundreds of these men over all the weekends that I did, and they were all kind of sitting in one of those places where something really shook their chain, and they had to figure out some other way to do it. So I don't know from personal experience if there's a way to uh, do that unwinding before something bad happens, but if there is, it's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to look into is where are the places in my life that the parts of me that I hide, repress, deny, those shadow places, where are those driving the ship? And if you can figure out a few of those, go unwind it.
It's interesting you talk about you and Annie have reached this place where rather than let it like fester become a shadow is to actually start the momentum as with just it's just a thought, right? And sharing it aloud. Is that there, a lot of ways, like as Jesse Eitzler really kind of made famous again with his big ass calendar, right? This idea of a misogi. In a lot of ways, like what you did was like that, that winter, river, winter waterfall, kind of get naked and get in that cold water to have that refresh, rebirth. In a lot of ways, that's kind of that it's almost like what the challenges you're outlining for men to say, "Hey, don't wait until, like, your clothes have been stripped from you. Like, go and seek that freedom through honesty."
Yeah, and instead of that brings up a great landmark of where to look. Don't look at the painful place of I have to come clean about this, or I have to own this, or I have to take my projection back from I've been projecting on my staff for all these years. My bullshit. They're actually great at their job, but I've been projecting this. Don't look at that as the hard thing you have to do. Look at the freedom on the other side. And then this hard thing you have to do just becomes a stepping stone. Yeah, I have to do this, but on the other side of it, I have this. And I can promise everybody listening to this, whatever came up when Ben and I were talking about that earlier, uh, there's a light so bright that's waiting to shine on you in that realm, whatever that is for you, uh, that you won't even see the shadow of the pain that you had to go through to get to it, whatever that pain is. It's usually just putting your story aside, dropping your ego a little bit, stepping up.
You said you retired about 10 years ago, and, and I have a sense that you will never, ever stop what other people say is working. I just get that sense about you, Barry. Is that from a guy who at 15 started juggling or literally spending, as you said, thousands of hours figuring out how to take a ball and juggle it on your head from ear to ear. Those are kind of leading indicators. Um, It's, but I know one of the things that had and I had been talking about kind of offstage is this idea is specifically for you of, like, helping entertainers understand that when the applause on stage ends, that's actually not the end. That's actually just the beginning. I'd love for you to kinda talk about your own journey and that and how you're utilizing that, and how that reflects into business, because I think that, you juggle and, I own businesses. And they're in a lot of ways, they are the exact same. You juggled, like, garden weasels, right? And, and I juggle in terms of, like, the ups and downs of what's happening in the economy, right? Like, there's a ton of similarities. We get applause when we have success, right? And you get the, "Oh," when you drop one of your right? And so, can you talk a little bit about your work with entertainers, but how that has translated into a lot of your conversations and talks you have in the business world?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Yeah, so it was around the time that this little gem was installed in my collarbone. I was couldn't juggle for 8 months. Only way I'd ever really earned a living in my life was doing these jokes. And I was like, man, if this is it. And Annie, the aforementioned angel, she said, you know, something you're really good at is booking a juggling act for a lot of money. And she just like threw that out. And I was like, how interesting. And it started making me think about entertainers. And yeah, they're not great at this side of it. You know, every entertainer loves the show. We live for that. But boy, put them on a call with a client or have them try and talk about their services in front of a networking group or God forbid make cold calls or just anything to sell it beyond what it's expected to be, which is what I certainly excelled at, was getting on these stages that had never had jugglers before. uh, that started my brain thinking about something that where I could teach jugglers. So yeah, around that time, I don't even know how sharp algorithms were or if your phones heard you talking in 2007, but I started getting ads for a guy named Jeff Walker who ran something called Product Launch Formula. And I was like, how interesting. And I jumped into his world and kind of took a course on how to put a program together. And I was like, man, before I knew it, I had this thing out online. And I was well known as a guy who did the kind of gigs that every entertainer would want to do. Like it was well known. We're not secretive about where we're working. And yeah, and all of a sudden it was like, holy cow. So that was super fun. I won't say that my 2 weeks of junior college after high school set me up to be a professor or a teacher, but I did keep it very real. I just said, here's what I do, here's what the office looks like. I built it into a course that lives on a platform, and we just passed it. It's funny, Ben, right before this, from 9 to 10:30 this morning Pacific time, I had my final call of an 8-week course with another group of entertainers who went through Showbiz Blueprint. Man, and I get teary seeing the transformation that people had, the gigs they booked. There was one guy in there who'd never booked a gig for more than $750, and he shared that he'd booked a $5,100 corporate gig. And I was like, dude, this is why I did this. So, and everyone in there just had things to say about how life had changed. So,
Mhm. Barry, I got a question for you because I think this is so true. I think there are a lot of people who have incredible services out there, but what do you find? Like, what was keeping that specific entertainer from booking more and asking more than 750? What was keeping him from the $5,500?
yeah, I often tell entertainers, most of you base your price that you say to a client on two things: what your competition does, what your competition charges, and the biggest number that your entire life experience allows to come out of your mouth. And those are both two terrible barometers to use for that. There's no reason you should be charging whatever anyone else does. And that number you have is some stupid story that was implanted to you by some single sentence from someone who wasn't doing what you do. So I think what's stopping them really is confidence, an example, a blueprint on how to do it. Like, this is how you speak, this is where you look, this is what you say. There's no course in that. Like, we'll spend, entertainers, magicians especially, they'll spend $5,000 on an illusion, but how are you going to sell that? How's that going to become a business asset instead of just something you own? And yeah, that changing that and changing the lives of entertainers. I think in our alumni we have maybe 18 or so who have done TEDx talks. Never came into the program thinking about that. But one of the things I talk about that is you have a life experience, you have a bigger story to tell, and you have a way to tell it that you can engage an audience from second one. I mean, you watch most TED Talks and people come out and they're a talking head on a red carpet against a blank background. It's like we don't have to start that way. Yeah. I had this great experience. I'll throw this story. Leave a second. You guys can cut this if you want. But I was in up in the mountain town where we lived in Nevada City, California. They had this fundraiser for the Performing Arts Center, and it was called Dancing with the Stars. They did it every year, and I was I was a contestant one day. I worked. They teamed me up with a professional dancer, and I had never danced. I told her the only thing I've ever used my feet for in my whole career is to get me to the center of the stage where my hands can do what they're good at. But I also told her, I said, I only do things like this to win. So I said, and I know you win things like this in the first 10 seconds. So our dance, and we did win. We got the, oh, this is great. Bonus, bonus for the, bonus for the YouTube viewers, Dancing with the Stars champion. Yeah, but it was funny, but we won. And I said to her, we win these things like this in the first 10 seconds. So our dance had us walking down stage with these canes that had a peacock feather in them. We got to the center stage. We blew the peacock feathers up in the air. We caught them balanced on our hands. And then she did a dance move, put it in her mouth, and I took it out of her mouth with a bullwhip. So that was the first 10 seconds. I snapped, I broke the tip off the peacock feather that was in her mouth. And I said, we need to win in the first 10 seconds. And we did. So it was pretty fun. Yeah. But it's, it's seeing that bigger vision of what's possible out there. And if someone else has done it, you already know it's possible. I often think about the first person who ever rode a unicycle. What the hell did that person have to go on? How do you not try it? Because the first couple tries on unicycle are terribly painful, even the first couple weeks. But someone in history said, "I'm going to ride this thing." But now we all know a unicycle can be ridden, so we're not shooting in the dark.
Yeah. You also made a comment about you said it's they also charge what their cumulative life experience says they can. Break into that, dive into that because I think this is so critical.
Totally, money issues. Most entertainers, in fact, just a lot of business people, we're all kind of told. There's a saying in Norwegian language. It translates in English like "Don't be such a big shot. Who do you think you are?" And it's in the lineage. I've had students from in Showbiz Blueprint from Norway, and they say, "Hey, we're taught this, and what you're telling us all goes against that." And I said, do you mind putting it aside for the 8 weeks of this class and making some proposals? And well, that guy has never charged his small amount again. It's who do you think you are? If you take advice from someone who's never been in the arena, I love that you mentioned that earlier. Uh, that advice is useless. It's absolutely useless. And most entertainers are taking advice from parents or from friends, or so I say other entertainers, what they're charging, or whatever their life experience leads them to be able to get out their mouth. But that number is always too small. They lose more gigs than they get by charging that. Then a corporate audience, a corporate buyer is never going to look at a $750 act and trust them with their audience for an hour. It's like, and they'll say, like, you get, money back guarantee. It's like $750 is a write off. The foam and the carpet of the green room costs more than that to rent. Uh, the padding under the carpet. So yeah, pricing appropriately. But it's hard. There's money issues all over the place. I'm a great candidate to have those, but fortunately, I got over those real early when I started seeing the impact we were having at meetings. My first corporate meeting was after a Renaissance Fair show. A guy said, "Could you guys MC a show for 4 days for Thrifty Drugs, which was a big chain in California at the time?" And I was like, "Oh, absolutely, that'd be great." But I think it's funny. I think I was able to get the word $4,000 out of my mouth, which, oh my gosh, that's not even a quarter of a juggling show at the end of my thing. But that was for a 4 day. But I'd never said that. We were passing the hat. It wasn't great positioning to ask for a big number. I'm standing there in tights with a hat in my hand. But but yeah, so it was great. But just seeing the impact we had on the crowd and how they were able to remember messages and how they talked about it after the event and how it was a highlight. And when we got introduced coming back on, or when we came out to introduce a speaker, like the whole room lit up. And I was like, this is worth a lot of money. So it's getting entertainers to understand that.
Have you found as you have kind of spanned the two gaps of what would be traditional entertainment, Barry, like, oh, hey, you're a juggler. Oh, hey, you're on stage performer. Have you found that there is similarities between regardless of whatever the business is, they are in it, and they are in the entertainment business.
Yeah. Was it P.T. Barnum that said every business is show business? I 100% agree with that. And especially, oh my gosh, in this world of shorts. I wrote a book about, I've been sugar free. I went sugar free on leap day of 2012 with my son. He was 9. But he said, "What are you going to leap today?" Like, I think he thought leap day meant you didn't do something. So I said, "Oh, I'm going to leave sugar for the day." We had just finished eating these big frozen yogurts that were so nasty, and it was February 28th of 2012. And my teeth, I could feel my pulse on my teeth. I was just like, I didn't need that. So I just said, I'm going to skip sugar, and I skipped it for leap day. And then I said, man, that felt good. I told my wife in the morning on the 1st of March, I said, I'm going to try a week of this. And then halfway through the week, I was like, I'm going to try a month of this. And then I was like, I'm never going to eat random sugar like that again. And that's gone. But I wrote a book called I Love Me More Than Sugar. Um, did really well, sold a bunch, but I went on TV. I was able to write a segment proposal for TV, and all I had to tell them was, I'm not a talking head. In this demonstration, I'm going to juggle an 8-pound bowling ball, which is the amount of sugar an American eats in 3 weeks, a tennis racket to represent healthy exercise, and an apple, a somewhat healthy way to get sugar in your life, and I'd eat the apple. Um, if you're not a talking head, whether you're a speaker or presenter, if you bring some kind of a prop, like find a prop. I always keep this thing by, like it just makes a story interesting. Find a way to use a prop. It connects people. It's something real that they can see and hold. Um, every speaker, every business is show business. In today's world of shorts and reels, you can't afford to just walk out on stage and be a talking head. I pity the audience that you do that to. You just can't.
Yeah. So if someone's listening to this today and they look at what they're doing now, whether it's a service, uh, what would you have them do for them to look at what they're charging? And the reason why I want to understand how you have this conversation, right? Because think about like juggling, right? It's literally, how long's a juggling show? 20 minutes?
Oh, we do an hour headline show. Yeah.
Yeah, an hour headline.
As a producer once told us, I measured your talk. There's 7 minutes of juggling in your 60-minute show. And I said, that's about right. That makes sense.
So when you think about in the whole scheme of everything, right? Like just I'm not saying it was just a juggling show, but I think that I think about this, where would we be as a country if people actually charged not what they think it should be, but what they actually would want it to be. And so someone's listening to today, what's the how do they become that performer that went from 750 to 5500?
Yeah. I mean, and I'll make it if you're a plumber or if you do heating and air conditioning or if you're a financial planner. Steve Martin had the line, be so good they can't ignore you. And you're going to lose some clients. I promise you, you're going to lose all the clients that are in that thing. And you're going to be invited into conversations that you never knew existed. There are people who aren't looking for the best deal on a plumber. There are people who aren't looking for the best deal on financial planning. There are people who are looking for someone who understands them, meets them where they're at, talks about an opportunity that exists for them in clear language that's about them, not about you, and shows the transformation so they have some proof and backup that they've done this for other people, and then makes a clean offer. Makes a really clean offer. I never talked about price once on my when I was selling Raspini Brothers. I always just found out my main goal in this conversation is to find out if I'm a fit for you. If not, I promise you I have a very twisted network of eccentrics that I can turn you on to. And if it is a fit, uh, by Friday you'll have a full proposal. Just like people do real business. You know, like they don't throw out a price on the phone if you call someone for heating and air conditioning. They send a proposal. So I ran it more like a business than someone who was just out looking for gigs. Yeah, and that was very different for someone to say, "But I'm just calling for a price." And I say, "Price if," and I would tell people flat out. I said, "Historically, I know that if price is the most important thing for you, I'm not the right act. But tell me about your event. Let's get into what you really want to have happen. What's a hit, a home run, and a grand slam look like for you for this event? And I'll hook you up with someone who is." And usually it ended up being me. But they called talking about price because somehow that was comfortable.
So one of the things you said there that really stood out for me is you said, "Hey, in 60 minutes, I did about 7 minutes of actual juggling." Right? And you said, "I'm gonna be so good that they just can't resist you. Maybe you're gonna lose some people." And you said, "I ran it like a business where I'd try to understand, and then I'd give them a proposal. And a lot of this sounds like structure. And so, can you break down why? Because it seems like to me structure for you is freedom. Can you break down like how you would build out an act? Because think about it, like you got paid, like at your peak, what would you get paid to do a juggling act?
15 to 20 was our appearance fee plus plus. So, plus expenses, plus transportation, plus, all the things and rooms, hotels, all that. So, yeah, and that was crazy money. My family, in a month I could do more than my dad ever did in his career in a year. And there was no reason for that to happen except I structure freedom lives inside a structure. I will live on that till the end, even on a daily basis. Like, what are you going to do today? Oh, guess what? If Michael Michalowicz's book, Profit First. I did a fun thing with my entertainers. That I had Michael speak to our entertainers about that. I asked him to when he came on. But after that, I turned it into life first. I just every day you get 24 hours deposited into this account. And then I structure out like, what are those going to do? I have more free time and I get more done, both. I mean, talk about cognitive dissonance. Every day I get more done and have more free time than anyone I know, just because I plan it out. I just know what I'm going to do for money making activities. I know what I'm going to do for. I have a category called swinging for the fences. I try and do an hour on most days for that, and it's just contacting people. It's just checking in with people. It's just talking to, throwing an idea to someone or reading something, and someone I don't even know. I'll find them on LinkedIn and just say, I just saw this ad that mentioned you, and here's like a couple ideas that just came to my head. And why in the world do you listen to me? I don't know. I'm a four-time world juggling champion. I've been on six TED. I'll throw in a little bit about that just so they'll listen. But man, those turn into conversations or contracts, consulting contracts that are crazy. And that's in my swinging for the fences uh, category. That's great. I give this to all my people. But yeah, personal development. I mean, this is in the morning. I just do something. This is usually an hour or 90 minutes, hour and a half. Money making activities, family. And this is just like meals, games, home projects, recreation, making stuff, whatever I like. My gardening is big in here. Swinging for the fences. This I'll always put in here. What would I say too? I ask myself, 6, 7 hours of sleep. And the number that's left down here is usually 8, 9, or 10 of hours of flex time. I can do whatever I want in that day. Zero issue. And but it was funny that came when Michael was talking to us about Life First, all the different accounts you put money into. I'm like, geez, why don't people do that with their
How,
hours?
how do you feel? How do you feel people allocate their profit now before they have a conversation like this?
Hottest gets the attention. I mean, a lot of people that I know, if there's an emergency, if there's something that's going to be lost, um, but it's rarely calculated and strategically executed. I mean, that I see, and I'm really speaking to entertainers because that's who I work with most. If I'm working with a corporate client as a consultant or coming in to watch a certain campaign play out, um, it's it's usually done from a basis of fear. Sadly enough, it's like, if we do this, who finding out first who can take the hit if this doesn't work out, which is just frightening. It's just coming at it. It's living below the line in my eyes. And then what have we done before? What test do we have? Which, yes, has to be done. But if I waited around to see, let me watch a couple people who are killing it in the corporate entertainment world, there wouldn't be the corporate entertainment market there is today. I humbly say that I was in on the forefront of that, like showing what was possible and breaking into the markets. I used to have 9 different places. Like we do like brain breaks in the morning. We do kickoffs, which are, RKOs are huge now. Regional kickoffs, they'll do those all the time at sales meetings. MCing, like there weren't ever comedy acts doing MCing, and now it's so common that we get to do something like that. Um, Headline entertainment after dinner, brain breaks we do during speakers, like we just come in and summarize. That was one of the things we did one year at TED, though. We got to sit up in this cool VIP room. We watched every TED talk in a session, and then we'd come on and we'd incorporate the guy who invented mushrooms that soak up oils, along with the heart attack person who watched her own heart attack. Like we would tie all that together in one. And my partner and I would just know the two bits we were going to perform, and we'd work bits of their talk into our routines we already had. So, but again, that was massive structure. Like we had holes for the jokes within the jokes that we knew worked.
That's so. That's really. That's really pretty impressive. I mean, it's kind of right up there with I'm looking at my note here in terms of that you like that's kind of up there with the fact that you could do 35 words per minute in Morse code.
It would sound to anyone listening to this like a steady stream of tone. Now I have a certificate from the American Radio Relay League on 35. I bet you now I could still do 25 pretty easily because I play it sometimes in the garage if I'm working on something, and my wife will invariably walk in and see me listening to a Morse code conversation and go, "I thought I knew you." But it's just so funny to I think one of those comforting things from childhood that it just feels good to my brain to listen to that stuff. So,
Well, it completes the trifecta. I mean, you're a juggler, oboe player, and what else did you say?
and ham radio operator, yeah, those are like the three things that yeah, it was yeah, it is. It comes back. I don't have an oboe anymore though. Dang, that was hard. Oboe was hard.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that structure piece. I don't think I've heard anyone quite put it out there like that. Um, and I love this idea of swinging for the fences.
There's zero loss in that world. There is zero. I have entertainers in Showbiz Blueprint. We coached the guy to do that today. He's getting a lot of inquiries now that he's doing this new system. And I said, every fourth call, double your price. Just say twice the number. Doesn't matter. And when you land one, you're never going to go back to that early price, and you're going to start getting way better clients. But if you're getting a whole yeah, you're getting a whole bunch of inquiries. You can play, you can test, and we have this wonderful thing right now called advertising, which you're barely old enough to remember. I certainly am, but where you drive along the highway and there were big billboards. Now they're all lawyers and religion, but that's all that's left. But boy, targeted advertising now. I mean, talk about I do it for my launches of Showbiz Blueprint every year, and I spend about $2.50 for each lead, and I sell $2,000 program. I mean, the ROI is incalculable. I mean, it's incalculable. Really, it's in the four digits of ROI.
Wow, that's that's pretty impressive. Barry, if people want to know more about you, they want to read your book, they want to follow you, they want to hop on socials, like, where do they go?
LinkedIn's probably good. You could put that link down there. Instagram, showbiz underscore blueprint. Um, yeah, I don't do too much social. It's funny. I've been on LinkedIn since the beginning. I have a premium account grandfathered in. They'd probably love for me to not pay 1 year, but I really use LinkedIn more as a DM service. I can write to the people I want to write to, so I use it for outreach. It's my swinging for the fences platform. I just go and connect with people on there, but I don't post. I don't do many articles. But yeah, feel free to drop me a line on LinkedIn. I would love to talk to anyone who's living a max life.
And if someone is in the entertainment space or wants to be able to utilize you in some sort of like service consulting, because I'm guessing you don't just deal with entertainers, you also deal with businesses as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's funny. I always did that when we did corporate gigs. I'd always make an offer to the C-suite team if they wanted to do a half-hour brainstorming in the morning after our show, and I would do an add-on menu item for that. It paid well before we had to go to the airport in the morning. But yeah, you got to sit in these rooms. Just what are you guys working on? What would it look like if you did it this way? It was so fun. It was really one of my favorite parts. In fact, when we had those booked in the morning, and the show was like, oh, well, let's kill the show and then we'll go do the fun thing in the morning. So those guys are great though, because they're all, stiff, and they just saw us last night, standing ovation from their people. They're basically willing to listen. So yeah, super fun to do that. Yeah. Find me on LinkedIn for that stuff. Any entertainers that happen to be listening to this, I'll tell my entire list about your podcast because it's stuff everyone should hear. Uh, showbizblueprint.com. Yeah. Check that out.
Barry, it's been an absolute pleasure. I don't think I've ever had 90 minutes go by as fast as this one. As you said, you've listened to a bunch of my podcasts, and as you know, I'd like to let our guests leave the last the last ripple, the last question, the last statement. But I think for you, what's the encore that you're stepping back on stage you'd like to let our audience leave with?
Yeah. I will, I will leave everybody here with this little piece that I realized one night out in the woods on a men's weekend in Texas that I was staffing, and it was something that happened for one of the men during the deep work session during the day, where he realized there was an entire world of people waiting to meet and interact with and live with and he had a big family, with the version of him that he was going to take home from this. And that came from his work with just wanting to shed his shit, just stop. Even if it meant dying and being reborn, he just wanted to stop living that. So I will make the invitation that there is an audience of people, professional, personal, familial, certainly, who are waiting to meet a a version of you that they maybe thought was in there, but hadn't shown up yet. So whatever it takes, if you want to drop me a line, ask me what that might be. We'll have a conversation about that too. That would be fine. Um, yeah, we're born one way, formed by these people who don't know what the hell they're doing in most cases, aka parents and teachers. They don't really know why we were put on this earth. We know that, and the sooner we can follow that, the sooner that audience will show up and give you the standing ovation.
Barry, thanks for being on the podcast.
Ben, honored to meet you. Thanks so much, everyone.